Hey everyone, I'm Glue. Welcome to my data pack project. So actually here on the old world, right? So this is one of the first things we built, and it was special, right? Because this was sort of the core, or one of the core concepts behind the data pack I'm making, which at this point was just a creative world with a bunch of command blocks. But what is this? Well, this was a encyclopedia room, if you will, right? So if we click on the little button, it says there, Cozy Wool. So this is a special ability granted to sheep, right? So they can use the ability Cozy Wool, which will then do something and affect the player. If we look around, right, we've got Snowed In, we've got Golden Egg, Tough Hide, right? Up here is some more hostile mobs. So for instance, this is a blaze, I'm pretty sure. So the ground around the blaze ignites, then the blistering heat drains you of energy, and weaken. Being close to the blaze has weakened you. So basically, all I'm doing is using a combination of 4 commands, basically. Particle, sound, tell raw, and then a actual effect command, so either damage, effect, something like that, to make it seem like the different mobs in the game have abilities, right? So this is what we're going to start working on, right? On the main save on Runechant, which is an actual data pack now, right? So I am a little bit bored of working on the weapons and spell system and porting stuff over for the optimization. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to tackle some mob abilities, right? So I have actually, so for instance, these were the spell books, what we were last working on, but now we're going to handle mob abilities, right? So I've set up the little blueprints, if you will, for us to actually work with them. And I've done 4, right? But these aren't really mob abilities just yet. So if we go function, should be Runechant, then mob, then ability, right? We have luck. So these abilities would replace an ability that a mob would use depending on a player's luck, right? So instead of them using a devastating attack, you might get glancing blow, or lucky find, or serendipitous, or fortunate recovery, right? And we can use it. The tell roll pops up in the chat. It says you luckily find a moment to recover, and as you can see, some hearts pop up, and if we were in survival, we would get a little burst of instant health. Similarly, we can use some of the other ones. So for instance, glancing blow will center itself on us, but it will, in terms of the particle, actually activate on the mob nearby, just because I'm calling the function as us the player, right? So this one instead would turn a devastating attack into something that just does minor damage now. So I think it's instant damage 1, which is still, a decent chunk of damage. I think it's what, 2.5 or 3 hearts, right? And then we have lucky find, and then we also have serendipitous, which for us, because we're activating it as us, gives slowness, but usually we just get the speed, and should be absorption, right? I think that's what I'm going to change to. Yes, absorption. I don't know why we didn't get it the first time, curiously. Anyway, so that is the concept, but how do we actually put it into action? Right, so here we have my Runechant folder. So these are the different categories of enemies, if you will. So for the base game, you've got passive, neutral mobs, and hostile mobs. So we go into any of these folders, it then lists out all the different mobs. Inside each of these, they'll have their different abilities. Since I haven't made any of the abilities, right now they're just template 1 and 2 for passive. Then for neutral, they'll have 3 abilities, right? So template 1 through 3. And then the hostile mobs will have 4. And lastly, I forgot, there's also bosses. So Elder Guardian, Ender Dragon, Ravager, Warden, and Wither. Now I know only the Wither and Ender Dragon in terms of the Minecraft wiki, or Minecraft itself, are bosses, but I think we can all agree these are basically bosses, and they deserve that extra ability. Actually, they have, 5. 5 abilities for bosses, 4 for hostile mobs, 3 for neutral mobs, and 2 for passives, right? So the general idea is to use this template. And again, all it is tell raw, although I didn't realize it was duplicated. It's a bit annoying because I have pasted the template into all the different folders, and that is double spaced by accident, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, so we have tell raw at all. We can specify distance. If it's a ranged ability, right, we could do 1 to 10, or sorry, well, range should actually be further, right? So it should be like 5 to 10 blocks. So if the play is between that range, then it will use the ability. And we can also use that to gate the play sound and the particle. And then all we have to do is add in, again, either, if it does a potion effect, if it summons a fireball, lightning, trident, anything like that, or we can just straight up use the damage command and damage any player that is in that range. So really simple to set up. I also color coordinate abilities, if you might have noticed. So lucky find is green, because this is just a beneficial ability. It doesn't have any other hidden objectives or effects, if you will, right? So it just says you attempt to scavenge something of a nearby enemy. Oh, that was horrible, right? Because there should be something off a nearby enemy. but that's green. And then yellow, serendipitous, which gave us potion effects, right? So it's not inherently bad, but it's not just good, right? It has a second function to it, so something you have to look into. And then glancing blow, which is damage or a negative ability, right, is color coordinated as red. So that is the general go, but I have to, of course, now set up all the abilities. Luckily, if we pop back into normal Runechant, right, I have the encyclopedia to actually, oh, this is the wrong world. If we head into the old one, right, again, I have the encyclopedia already built, right? So I think using this, I gave all passive mobs 1 ability, then I gave all neutral mobs 2 abilities, right? And then I gave all hostile mobs 3. So I'm going to go ahead and give them all 1 extra one, just to keep things fresh for me as well, because I don't want to just copy things over, right? I want to do it better. But yeah, I can basically just copy or transplant them from here into that, and I don't have to think up too many. But in terms of creativity, if you will, the real hurdle for me isn't coming up with abilities, right? I can generally think up some pretty fun or annoying things, like creepers turn invisible or become charged just instantly, just strike it by lightning. Or what else could we do? Give it speed, haste, something like that. Not haste doesn't work, but give it speed, give it absorption so you can't actually clear it before it explodes, right? And there's lots of interesting things we can set up, right, that shall be fun or new, a new experience at the very least. The issue that really slows me down is coming up with the particle and the sound effects to correspond, right? For a lot of mobs, I'll just pull from their normal mob sound effects, but then, adding in a particle is sometimes annoying. Some things don't need particles, but it would be nice. But yeah, this is the real slowdown, right? But anyway, I'm going to get to work. I'm going to set up a few. I'll probably work on the passive mobs, right? I should be able to crack them out, and then we'll go through them, make sure that they work, because I still also have to set up the chain of events that triggers the abilities. They'll simply be on a timer, right? So if the player's nearby an entity, they will get the tell roar. If they're not nearby, they won't get the tell roar, but the mob will most likely still use its ability. That is what I think I wanted to do, because I want to sort of interact with the world around it. So for instance, iron golems might just have a ability to attack hostile mobs, in which case, I want them to be able to use it, even if the player's not around. Of course, they have to be loaded, but as in not near enough for the player to get the tell roar message, right? So just flood chat, but it still is alive, if you will. The world is still alive. Anyway, I'm going to work on the passives and the setup, and then we'll go through it a bit more. Right, so how's it going? Good? Yeah? Slowly been working on it. I am done with this world, in terms of the passive mobs, at least, right? I've slowly removed them all out as I've copied them over, just so I can keep track of it. But the big thing, right, is going to be the setup. How do we actually trigger the abilities, right? Any suggestions, my camel friend? No? Anyway, why don't we get to that? Why don't we see what we can do? So, starting off, if I go back to passive, and then we go to ally, for instance, right? They've got both abilities. Axolotl has 2, Bat has 2, Camel only has 1. So, a lot of them, I still have to come up with the second one. It's fine. But the big thing again is, how do we activate it? So I've set up a controller function, right? And basically this is the gist. So we're going to execute if a timer matches something, right? And this way we can have every entity activating on a different timer, meaning that no abilities trigger at the same time, and it feels like there's, variation. If you're fighting a big cluster of mobs, right, they're all going to use their abilities at different intervals, so that should be fun. Then we're also doing an RNG check, right? So this will help us determine which ability to use. So for instance, for the passive mobs, they have 2 abilities, so we'll probably have 3 ranges of numbers, but only use 2, if that makes sense. So for instance, 0 to 333 probably won't do anything, but then we'll start at 334 all the way to 666, okay? And that will activate the first ability, and then we'll go from 667 all the way to 1000, because that's the interval of my RNG is 0 to 1000, and that'll activate the second one, meaning that every time it cycles, there is a chance for it to be a dead roll, and then not to be any ability activated, right? So again, still keep the randomization, keep it fresh. That will help prolong the interval, because rather than it just activating every cycle, it's going to go in and out. So to the player, it makes it feel more varied. Okay, and then we just have to specify the entity type. So it does mean that there are going to be a lot of lines to this, and I'll probably end up using different timers for each different entity. So for instance, passive mobs, because they're all beneficial abilities, I'll probably pick a high timer, probably like 1 minute. So every 1 minute, a passive mob has the chance to use an ability, right? It'll have a 66% chance to use an ability. And I might tweak as well. I might make it 50% chance and then split between. But yeah, so every minute passive mob, and then we'll do, I don't know, for the neutral, we'll maybe do 30 seconds. And then for the hostiles, we'll do, I don't know, 12 seconds or something like that. Right, I think they're all the timers I have. That should be an S. What do we have? We have, yeah, 12 seconds, 30, 12. Bosses will probably be 8 because we do want them to cycle a lot quicker. So that'll probably be 8 seconds. And then my own bosses, that's actually the curiosity. Probably use the 10-second timer between the two. Or even use the 12-second timer and 15-second timer. 15 seconds for hostiles, 8 seconds for boss variant. So when I say boss, I mean Wither Skeleton, sorry, not the Wither Skeleton, Wither, Ender Dragon, Elder Guardian, Ravager, and Warden, right? I should really start. I never annotate, and I really should. Is it 2 slashes? I think it's 2 slashes. So for instance, this will be the passive chain, then this will be the neutral chain, right? And then this will be the hostile chain, and then this will be the boss chain. Then we need special, and we also need Runechant, right? So Runechant is all my custom bosses. So special, Runechant, no, sorry, we want elite, right? And then essentially I want to make sure they're all on different timers. That's the only hassle here, right? Luck will be a chance to overwrite any of them as well. Probably not the passive mobs because we don't need to, but for instance, the dead roll will probably be a luck roll instead for the hostile and neutral. In all honesty, me just sitting here thinking through isn't really going to explain it well, is it? So give me a second, I'll write it up and we'll go through it properly. Okay, so this is basically the setup, right? So for passive mobs, it's going to execute at a 1-minute timer, right? If it matches a certain interval, depending on the mob, that way we can split them all up. It will then check the RNG, right? So I have a random number generator going in the background, generates a number every tick between 1 and 1,000. So if it's between this range, it'll use their first ability. If it's between this range, it'll use their second ability. And then if it's below the 334, they'll use no ability, right? So just to create some randomization. Then we have the same for neutral, but because they have an extra ability, the ranges for the randomizer have been extended. Well, actually they've been reduced, right? And then same for the hostile, but hostile is now where we introduce our luck ability, right? So rather than having a dead roll, so no ability to proc, they can now proc one of our luck effects, right? So fortunate recovery, glancing below, lucky find, or serendipitous. Then we have the boss, same thing, they now have a luck check. Otherwise they have 5 abilities. So we've split up the interval far greater. Elite, right? So they only have 2 abilities. Elites are going to be entities that I spawn in. So for instance, I might spawn in, a certain mob on a skeleton horse, for instance, and they'll be considered an elite, and they'll have their own unique abilities along with whatever mobs make up them, right? So hostile versus that. So in that scenario, I probably, it'll be difficult sorting out the timers to make sure everything is split up enough, right? But I do have, for 3 seconds, so the shortest interval, I have 60 ticks to work with to make sure there's no overlap. I could always exclude the lower intervals from each, right, if that makes sense. So for instance, the 8-second timer can only be the last 60 ticks, right, because it won't have the 5 seconds or the 3 seconds and so on and so forth. That might work depending on how many mobs I have. I have to do the math and count it out. And then we have Runechant, which is going to be my custom bosses, right? So they'll have 8 abilities, but they have an arrange mechanic, meaning that they only use the 4 abilities first, and then once they're in range, then they can access all 8 abilities. And they'll generally, they won't double up, right, because the timers will be different, but they will have access to 8 abilities then, and I guess they'll be somewhat more frequent. No, I'm sorry, I'm a bit tired. It's getting late, this is taking longer than what I thought. A special will be a Diablo style buff, right? So mobs every now and then will get a special buff or a special tag that we'll then look for, and they'll get access to 2 more abilities, right? So you could have a special elite hostile mob, right? In which case they'll have access to their 4 hostile abilities, their 2 elite abilities, and their 2 special abilities for a total of 8, equivalent to a Runechant boss. Now, Runechant bosses in themselves, right? They could then be a hostile mob. So they have the 4 boss, the 4 hostile, the 4 from in range, and then they could also be a special entity, right? So they could end up with 14 different abilities they're cycling through, so it can get pretty nuts. And then difficulty, right? Difficulty will be a mechanic where depending on how long you've been alive, right, the difficulty will ramp up and mobs will have access to a special difficulty ability, depending on, like I said, difficulty. So easy might just be something minor, some sort of debuff or some sort of buff for them, and then progress as you stay alive for too long. All right, I am going to end this here, right? Unfortunately, can't show anything off. Well, you know what? Why don't we see if the camel could proc, right? So I've gotten it a few times. If we look at the chat, yeah, we got it twice. This is the old school camel, but it is the same ability, right, that I have poured over. I just have to add one more. Come on, proc it, so I can show off how it works. Although, yeah, there we go. So it says travel companion, pops up in chat, right? We see being near the camel makes you feel lucky, and we get luck 3 for 30 seconds. Pretty neat. But yeah, we'll leave it there. I am going to go to sleep and then work on this. And hopefully next time, right, we can start looking at passive mob abilities. The only hurdle that I need to figure out is how to make sure they don't just trigger on everyone, right? Either some sort of counter mechanism, so only X amount of mobs can trigger. But at the moment, the way this function will work is every mob will run it, right? And then they'll get weeded out depending on the if statement. So if it matches them, then they'll use that ability. But that means if you have a cluster of, say, chickens, right? If one chicken rolls a successful roll, then all the chickens will be rolling a successful roll, which doesn't quite work, right? Because there's not a limit to them. So, you know, if you have like 64 next to you, all 64 will spam chat with their ability and, you know, just duplicate it if it's like summoning an item. I think for the chickens, they can lay eggs, golden eggs. Yeah, so I do have to work around that and figure that out, but it's a start. And more importantly, right, it's keeping me fresh in terms of then going back and working on weapons. It's gonna be good, hopefully. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.